Hey keyboard nerds, I wanted to say thank you for engaging with this channel. I love the community of keyboard nerds that we're creating here, and I wanted to respond to some comments that I get on YouTube. There's nothing I love more than responding to comments on YouTube, and also talk about some of the most frequently asked questions I get in master classes. Let's get into it. So one of the comments I got not too long ago is, how do I know when to play and when not to play in a song or in a band? And that is a great question and a very important question. I have a rule, and a lot of this I've learned from my wife, who is an amazing songwriter and an amazing singer. We've spent a lot of time together, and it's always respect the lyric and the vocal and the story. And what I always try to do is not step on that, and not play when a singer is singing, and not play when an important lyric is playing. And there's something that I've thought of, which I call the Albert King method, because Albert King is one of my favorite blues musicians of all time. And if you listen to him play guitar, he has this really beautiful way of singing a line, and then right when he's finished, he'll deliver a guitar line. And it's always complementary to the vocal. And he doesn't always play a guitar line. Sometimes he just has his hands off of the guitar and he'll just wait till just that sweet spot to just deliver a line. And I think that's a really important skill to have as a musician, is to know to pick your spots that are musical and supportive of what everybody else is doing. And remember that music is collaborative and you're working with others. This is one of those things I feel that separates amateur players from pro players. Pro players, you know they can play the phone book. You know they can play whatever they want, but they don't. They just pick their spots, and when they do something, when they do say something, it has a lot of meaning. Certainly there's always a time where you can show off your chops and really get a chance to rip, but you got to know when to take those spots, and you got to pick those spots and find the right time to deliver that kind of firepower. A question that I get a lot, because inevitably at some point you'll be asked to take part in your first recording session. You know, it might be a band that you're playing with on the weekends and they want to go in and do a demo, or somebody's written a few songs and they want to record them. You're being asked to play keyboards. And a lot of times if you play Hammond organ, you're just going to get asked to play on stuff just because you play Hammond organ, because there's not very many guys that do it, and it's such an important sound on so many records, people want it. So I get asked, should I prepare for the session in advance? And my answer is no. Sometimes you think that you want to be over-prepared, and there's a difference between preparing for a gig and preparing for a session. When you're preparing to play a gig, it's really important to over-prepare and spend all of that time practicing and working the parts, because when you're doing a gig, you're often being given tunes that already have keyboard parts on them, so your only job is to learn those parts and deliver them exactly like the record, which takes a lot of preparation. But when you're in the studio, your job is to come up with something original and creative on the spot. So what ends up happening is you spend the night before the session going, okay, I think this song I'm going to work out this part and this solo. It might seem cool, but what you're actually doing is you're painting all of the other musicians on the session into a corner. Now they have to follow whatever it is that you've brought into the room for that day, and you're forcing them to follow parts that you've created. Actually, the magic with recording and with sessions is the collaboration. It's the magic that happens when 4 or 5 musicians get together in a room and create something together. And I think that magic can only really happen when everybody comes in being open and being a blank page, so to speak, and just being willing, confident enough in your abilities to just know that in the moment it will all be okay. And together you're going to create something really, really cool. And when you do that, you'll probably be most proud of those recordings because you're going to hear yourself playing lines and parts that you would never think of, that aren't the usual pathways that you would always go down. They're going to be those lines that you're like, how did I think of that? That's not something that I usually play. And that's what's so cool, right? Because when somebody else plays something, it suggests that you play differently. And that's really where the creativity happens. I love, Quincy Jones always says in sessions, as a producer, and producers have to be somewhat prepared. They're the ones that have to have the charts together and know the framework of the song, how many verses, how many choruses, etc., just to apply some organization to the session. But he always says, I like to be organized, but I like to leave 20% for God to walk through the room. And what he's saying is to leave that room for inspiration to happen, for creativity, for spontaneity to happen. That's where the magic is. So if you can, just trust in yourself and just walk in a blank slate and get collaborative with the other players, and great things will happen. So in contrast to not over planning for a studio session, I do think that it's always a good idea to be as prepared as possible with your individual skills as a musician. And this is why we practice. I once read something about fighters. Fighters will spend hours and hours practicing their moves before they get into the ring for a fight. And all of those hours of practice, when they're tired in the ring in the middle of a fight, instinct just takes over and they just start doing those moves because it's just part of their DNA. It's just they've worked it so much that it becomes part of you. Practicing is the same thing. You want to work on your skills so that when you get into a band, the stuff just comes out of you naturally. You're not having to think too much about it. That's what practicing is all about. It's about diminishing the barrier between this and this, between your hands and your head, and being able to speak fluently and being able to communicate and talk. So it is very important, in my opinion, to always work on your musicianship, practice, and that's the best thing that you can do for studio sessions, is just be prepared musically in your own way. It's the best thing that you can do as a musician, whether you're preparing for a session or for a gig. Practicing and being confident in your own abilities is the best asset that you'll bring into these situations. I believe in totally becoming the band when I take a gig. And what I mean by that is really immersing yourself in the culture and in the music before you even set foot on stage with the band. Many times when I've gotten a gig, I will be thinking about, okay, is it a southern rock band? What is it that I'm going to wear? What's the gear that I'm going to use? A lot of times I will pick keyboards that are specific to that era of music, or I will pick clothing that I feel will fit with the brand that they've already created. A lot of times before I ever touch the keyboards, when I first receive the material from a band to learn, if I've got, say, 40 tunes to learn, I will just listen to it for about 2 weeks straight, everywhere. When I'm out for a walk, when I'm in the car, when I'm working out, I will just immerse myself in listening to the music, listening to the lyrics, the songs, the stories, and really get a full understanding of the picture of what the spirit of that music is before I ever even touch this thing. And what I find is that when I do that, when I do get here, it's so much easier to learn the gig because I've already got it in my head and in my heart, so to speak. So that's what I mean when I say becoming the band. One of the questions that I often get asked is, what should I practice? Great question. One philosophy I've always had is practice what you love. Think of music like you're throwing things in a blender and you listen to all of these different keyboard players and you take a little piece from this guy. You're like, I love that lick that Nicky Hopkins plays on that record. I'm just going to take that one thing and throw it in the blender. And I love that organ thing that Billy Preston plays. Oh, I love the sound Jimmy Smith gets there. What's that drawbar setting? Throw it in the blender. You know, you throw 1,000 things like this in the blender. What ends up happening after a couple of years is what comes out is your style of playing. If you're learning something that you don't like the sound of, or you're not into it, you'll never actually integrate it into your playing. Learn things that really resonate with you. And a lot of times, if I'm learning a solo, or in the past, you know, when I used to learn a lot of solos, I got to the point where I wouldn't learn the whole solo. I would just go through and go, oh, I like that lick. Oh, I like that lick. Yeah, this one, not so much. To just cherry pick all of the stuff that I loved and throw it in that blender. So I think, you know, what should you practice? You should practice things that sound good to you and things that you want to hear in your playing, and be yourself. You know, a lot of people will tell you should practice this, or you should play like this guy or play like that guy. Play like the guys that you like to listen to. Be yourself. Be your own musician. One of the questions I get is, what are rehearsals about? Is it a place for everybody to learn the songs? And what do I expect when I'm going to a rehearsal with a band? This is a controversial question, let me tell you. We talk about this a lot, and I think where I've gotten to is that a rehearsal is not the place to learn the tunes. Here, in your basement, at home, in the woodshed, so to speak, is where you should be learning the songs. The rehearsal is the time where a band gets together to just play through the songs to make sure everybody's gelling and the parts are cool and, you know, everybody's having a good time. Everybody already knows the music. And in most professional rehearsal environments that I've been in, that's the case. And rehearsal is not the time, in my opinion, to be figuring out how the songs goes. So, at home, learn your material. Be super prepared. And you'll have a lot more fun at rehearsals. There you go. So if it's not obvious, I love talking about this stuff. Like, playing keyboards and music is my life's passion, and I absolutely love teaching keyboards, which is why I designed the Universe of Keys online program. And if you haven't checked it out and you feel that you want to take your organ or piano playing to the next level, check it out. There's over 300 videos there. In fact, today we were filming more content and we're constantly adding more to it, and it's a huge resource of information. So please check it out. And I also wanted to say that when I'm not on tour, there's nothing I love more than doing master classes. I do them via Zoom, and it's enabled me to meet so many cool keyboard players around the world, make lots of new friends, and it's just a really cool way for me to be able to help you work on specific things for your gig or for whatever your specific goals are. So please don't be afraid to reach out to me. I'm always here for you. I'm always interested in teaching, and it would be my honor to do a masterclass with you. And thank you again for all the comments and questions. Please keep them coming. I'll talk to you soon.